Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of the Bookum Nook Show. My name is Kyle Colley and this is a special episode of Author Talks Podcast, a podcast to hear the behind the scenes stories, ideas, and writing journeys of authors. This episode is brought to you by Bookum, the book community's new and best way to host dynamic online book clubs. Download the app and start your book club today at www.bookumapp.com. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Our special guest host today is Hannah Lisa Lohr. Hannah is a book content creator and she's the host of the MoodyReaders Book Club. She's a book enthusiast, a creative, and a Swiftie. Our guest today is the detailed Sarah Chapelle. Sarah is the New York Times bestselling author and creator of the Taylor Swift style blog and book. Since 2011, with the blog, her writing has been featured everywhere from Wall Street Journal to People's Magazine. She is a writer, a journalist, a fashionista. She is a lover of the color green, and of course, a Swiftie. Sarah, welcome to the Author Talks podcast.
That was such a great intro. Thank you so much, Kyle, for the introduction. And of course, for having me on, and Hannah for offsetting the balance of this conversation. I'm excited.
Exactly. Yeah, let's get into a little bit of a fashion. I know fashion plays a big part in what you write about, your style, and as well as Taylor Swift style. I would love to hear some outfits that you remember kind of wearing as a kid that grew up, that stuck out, or what kind of brought you to fashion.
The outfits that I personally wore.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, it's really funny because I feel like I can track my own personal trajectory when it came to I feel like so much of being a young woman, especially, is figuring out who you are and how you want to present yourself to the world. And that most often comes down to your clothes. And the thing about fashion is that it will always speak for you without you even opening your mouth, without you intending to communicate something about yourself. How you show up in this world and what you show up in this world will speak on your behalf. And I can remember, growing up very much a tomboy. My mom was a nanny when I was a kid, and the family that she looked after the most when I was a young child, the child in the family closest in age to me was a boy. So I sort of felt like I was growing up with a slightly older brother. And I would get into soccer and I would get into softball and I would try to follow him and his friends around, and I would wear aggressively all blue outfits and baseball hats and overall the 90s overalls. And I remember a certain point in my life where he would turn to me and say, you'll never be one of us. You're just a girl. Um, and that sticks out in my brain. And I was like, okay, then I guess I'll be, the girliest girl ever. And so I took ballet and I went into dance and I would wear pink, and and I feel like there's so much of that sense of defiance in how we show up and how we want to reclaim parts of our identity in Taylor and in her discography and in her reclamation of girlhood through her music and also in her fashion. She is somebody who has never shied away from a sparkle, who has never shied away from an aggressive array of sequins, and embracing and celebrating girlhood and being sensitive and poetry and feelings and emotions, and not only carving out such a beautiful space for that in her music, but also in her fashion, and showing up in this world in a very girly way, and celebrating that and validating that in a way where now we're at a point in time where it's not just my book analyzing her fashion at such a close level, but other books, other entire newspapers have divisions for covering Taylor Swift. It's so cool that we're at a place now where we take her work so seriously that we're devoting such resource to documenting and analyzing the seriousness of her fashion and her style. I also went through a punk phase where I put eyeliner only in my waterline and no other makeup, and wrote aggressive punk rock lyrics on my jeans. But I think who doesn't have that phase at some point in their life.
I'm that's your own Bleachella phase of sorts.
Yeah, exactly. That I was going through my own Bleachella phase, and it was short-lived, just as short-lived as Bleachella was.
No, I
She's
love
so
it.
real for that.
I think we've all done it. No, I even tried the platinum blonde myself, and the commitment's crazy. So it's hard to keep up with that one. So I don't blame
The
you
the
for being
the
sharp.
upkeep and the maintenance of the hair, yeah, it's a lot.
Absolutely. I specifically wanted to ask you, as someone who's been following you honestly for years, so I followed you like
Oh,
across different accounts. I started my book account and I was like, wait, now I'm only on my book account, but I still need to follow Sarah. So I've been following you for years. I love seeing what Taylor's wearing. She keeps you very busy, especially these days, because she's in her outside era, as we call it. She is going to games, she's doing things constantly. So she's keeping you booked and busy. And I'm not sure exactly where your story began. I know when I found you, but I've also been a Swiftie since debut. And of course, we didn't have the social media that we have back then. And we mentioned you kind of started with this blog. Now it's more social media based. Where exactly did your journey start with starting this account with Taylor Swift Style?
yeah. So Tears of Style is actually the outcome of me starting a blog of the same name when I was in university studying to become a journalist. I was studying to acquire my bachelor's degree in journalism. And obviously, leading up to all of this, I had been a fan of Taylor's music since 2006. I had been very interested in the intersection of how fashion defines how we show up in this world. It helps us, navigate our identity, is a sense of expression, is a sense of exploration, is a sense of joy. And then I was obviously, pursuing a degree in something where I wanted to cover news and events with fairness, with, deep sense of reporting, with a sense, with a bent specifically towards, human interest and features and getting to know people and writing their stories in, a detailed and vivid way. And so I started this blog in October 2011, which, by the way, is 13 years ago. Um, and it, I started it originally just identifying her fashion. At the time, I wasn't, covering or providing commentary. I just thought at the time that people would want people who just like me who are interested in Taylor and who are interested in the fashion and who are interested in, online blog content just wanted the facts. They just wanted the information about what she was wearing. And then it kind of started to grow and become something, and it became something deeper when people started asking me for my opinions and my commentary and my thoughts on what Taylor was wearing. And that was kind of a transformative part of the blog's journey. And I think is ultimately, what has led to an entire book being written about it when people told me that my opinions mattered. When people told me that the way that I write impacts them and changes the way that they think and changes their approach to things. Not just, providing the exact item that Taylor is wearing, but placing it within context and providing meaning and providing history and providing the surrounding facts of what that outfit may mean. Not only, specifically to Taylor, but also just generally speaking in my thoughts on it. There's so many moments where I just think that fashion does not exist in a vacuum. Like, in order to understand text, context matters. And I think much like when you listen to a Taylor song, you can certainly listen to Taylor's discography and enjoy it, like for what it is and what it's presented as. But a huge part, I think, of being a Taylor Swift fan is that when you understand the lore behind the song, when you understand the history, when you understand the relationships, when you understand the emotion, then the song becomes a far richer text. And the same goes for her outfits, where you can say, like, that's a really great outfit that she's wearing to the latest Chiefs game. But when you understand the deeper meanings behind, like, oh, maybe she's wearing a lot of Marquise jewelry because Marquise cut diamonds look a lot like footballs. And you start to understand that dressing and fashion has just as much intention and thought and emotion put behind it as, a choice of word in a song lyric, right? It's meant to convey something. And when you understand all the pieces of it, it becomes a richer text to enjoy, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was interesting reading your blog and just seeing the nuance of, like you said, the mention of the music and then the Easter eggs within the clothing. How do you kind of get all that and process and write it out so quickly? Because I'm sure there's the turnaround time can be quick if, if Taylor Swift's wearing something yesterday, you're like, okay, I got to get that out so people can see it. So what's the turnaround and what have you learned from writing the blog over this period of time?
Yeah, it's really difficult in this day and age where I think there's time constraints and demands on media, where we're expected to provide information, provide it quickly, and to provide a full breadth of experience and information and emotions and thoughts and commentary and like all of these things instantaneously. And to me, I feel, the pressure to provide that information to people, but it's also hard because I'm personally still processing folklore, which was 4 years ago. So it's kind of this dichotomy of trying to process things as fast as possible in real time while also giving myself the space to process those things in order to come to a place where I can provide that context, where I can provide that nuance. So it's kind of a constant battle, but I also think that what's really cool is being able to give yourself the space to change your mind about art and to have an open relationship with art, where if you allow your mind to change, or if you allow art to kind of enter your life at different points when you may or may not need it, and have, the experiences and the thoughts and the feelings of your life as it change with you and with the art, really cool things can happen. Like, we're 5 years out from Lover, and I'm just now understanding new tones of the song Me and of her fashion from that time period. And I think that was such a powerful part of writing this book, is going back through my blog archives and seeing all the different versions of myself that I have been in documenting Taylor's fashion, of, being a university student, being a person who just moved out of her parents' apartment and, is struggling on the job for the very first time. A person who is dating a person who got married, like all of these past versions of myself that I've been in documenting her fashion and listening to Taylor's music. That all kind of came together as I was writing the book and having this opportunity, long lens to look back on her fashion and think new things about her fashion from this far away lens. Like, there were so many moments of looking at Speak Now's fashion where you think about the girl who she was at that time in the context of things that happened to her and how that showed up visually in the albums, music videos and the Candids and the Tool. Like, it was just a fascinating thing to be able to look back on.
That's interesting. And to that, like, how do you think about community? Because I think when you write blogs and this long form process, like, how do you bring in the community in different ways as a writer?
I think when you show up consistently and create this open, safe channel network for people to show up in, and you show up as a person who encourages diversity in opinion, and that there's safety in that, and there's also fun in that. I think there's a dearth on the internet of people who are able to come together and share differing opinions with the original intent of the internet, which is to connect people, which is to reach out a hand across this wide space of, regardless of, time and location, to connect people with like-minded interests. And I hope that my spaces represent like a rare respite on the internet where it's okay if you don't like something, just as much as it's okay if you loved something that other people did not. And I hope that people find fun in that. So it's all about, I hope, the energy that you put out into the world. And I think those people who share in the desire of nuanced, careful, safe, interesting, contextual spaces will find you. That's my hope anyway.
I would be curious to hear a little bit more about your direct community, like peeling back the curtain a little bit.
So it is just me, but having done this for as long as I have, there are certainly like recognizable things that come up in every designer's, wheelhouse, where there are certain house codes that are distinct to that brand. Yeah, lots of experience.
That's extremely impressive. I've always wanted to know. And I'm like, as a Swiftie for, since debut, I feel like I've recognized certain brands and things that she goes back to time and time again. Of course, she's also very much a girl's girl, so she chooses, her friends' brands, and she also is really good at supporting small business. So I'm like, it's hard to know, like, yes, some pieces are recognizable, but some are from some small Etsy shop. So she's got you working hard, searching the internet and scouring. I'm sure you love a reverse image search. That probably
The
helps.
thing, yeah, I think it's like I try to make it akin to having been doing this since 2011, it's almost like when I feel like Instagram was in its infancy, let alone, all of this really helpful technology that we have nowadays, that it's almost akin to like having learned how to shoot on film first before digital, where you have a lot of, skills to fall back on when all else fails. Having zoomed in on hundreds upon hundreds, maybe even 1,000 pairs of jeans at this point in time to be able to discern what pocket style and what button style belongs to what brand, and being able to recognize it based on that and not other helpful tools nowadays.
Yeah, did you move towards writing a book also as like a means of like a timepiece? Like, because I think with the blog, I think you started on Tumblr, right? Or you're still on Tumblr. So when it comes to the book, like what brought that out and what was the process of starting writing the book?
The book I hope exists as this boom or this, comprehensive, almost an encyclopedia of her fashion and her style from debut all the way up through to Midnights and the Eras tour. And the process of writing it was very much going through my own blog's archives. I think a book of any size and length and topic, even a fiction book, requires so much research on an author's part in order to impart a sense of reality and vividness and authenticity to a book, even if a plot line is, fictional. So like any book, this book required so much research. And I feel very lucky that I had, unbeknownst to me, been conducting very helpful research for 13 years that formed the basis of this book. And it was very fun going back through my own blog posts and either finding myself agreeing or disagreeing with my original commentary on certain outfits. That was very fun. But I hope that, when people pick this up, that it's, a love letter to Taylor and this incredible visual legacy that she's built over the last 17, 18 years. And that even if you don't read it, it's a beautiful thing to put on your coffee table or bookshelf.
Specifically, you had mentioned how you're very inspired by Taylor Swift's lyrics, and I think we all are. I'm curious to kind of talk a bit more about how that's shaped your own approach to writing commentary. I feel like it's got to be, first of all, daunting because the Swiftiedom is a huge community and we're all very protective of our queen, or as some will call her, our mother. So I know that, that's got to be really intimidating to, first of all, put your own commentary out there when there's such a community backing her. So of course, it's like, how do you be constructive? But also thinking about the way that she writes, you almost want to make sure you're paying an homage in a correct kind of way. Of course, you're not trying to sound like her tone of voice, but you're also trying to kind of match a similar energy of sorts.
I think what's interesting about Taylor is that she's been able to inspire, the next generation of singer-songwriters in ways that feel unique to them, because Taylor's whole ethos is authenticity. And I feel like you can see bits and pieces of Taylor isms in, Gracie, in Sabrina, in Phoebe, in Griff, but they all also feel authentically them, because Taylor's entire thing is like, write what you feel, write your life. And that's certainly not new to Taylor, but in terms of, the generation of songwriters who are inspired specifically by her, this, diaristic approach to documenting their life, where you can feel that semblance of Taylor-ishness, but everything feels like them still at the end of the day. And I think that's the most inspiring part of Taylor's entire, and like also the most enduring part of her, legacy and why we all admire her so much is because everything feels real because it is. And that's why we're so attached to her, you know, as a person and also her work. When it comes to how I approach commentary and how I approach my writing, I don't know if I necessarily feel a pressure to allude or reference her writing in a way of like creating a sense of familiarity for Swifties, or like an entry point where like my writing should be similar to her writing so that people like it, or that people will feel familiarized to it or attuned to it. I think much like taking a page out of Taylor's book, it's just writing what you feel, writing what you know, writing what comes naturally to you. And you know, my love of books, you know, predates Taylor. Like I was 6 or 7 years old in the third row middle of my mom's Plymouth Voyager, and I'm an only child, so that's just like sitting as physically far away from another human being as possible in order to sit there and write or sit there and read. So, you know, books were my original, you know, gateway into storytelling. And I spent, you know, my early childhood writing poems and essays. So, and like, I guess in the blank space left when asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? My dream was always author. And that, you know, predates Taylor. So this is my childhood dream come true, but it's in service of and strengthened by and set very much to a soundtrack of Taylor's music. Like my life wouldn't look or feel or sound the same without her music. And I hope that this book, like when people read it, that they feel my voice when I like in all of the things that I'm writing and feeling, but that it's a testament to Taylor's vulnerability and authenticity that I felt brave enough, I guess, to write my thoughts and my opinions, because I think that's what she does best.
That's well said. And then when you think about like the blog and the writing and how things have kind of shifted through social media, like how have you used like other mediums to kind of like portray the blog and make it unique? Because I know you've stepped into TikTok and other things as well.
Yeah, I think the area that I'm most excited by in terms of diversifying of content is Substack. Like the world of newsletters is very exciting to me as somebody who grew up with, you know, bookmarked blogs and who still reads like so many blogs like to this day. So the rise of, you know, longer form personal essays and thoughts and longer form pieces on Substacks in the form of newsletters is very exciting to me right now.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about how exactly you went from the blog, the internet, to the book. Where was it like you had mentioned like you loved reading and you had already been writing at a young age, but was it something, you know, you started pitching on your own? Was there the community demanding for it? Honestly, there's probably a lot of things happening behind the scenes. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how the book came to be.
My editor, the editor of Taylor's Style is a Swiftie, and I don't think that this book would have come into fruition if not for it being in the hands of somebody who I trusted with the story and who took and takes Taylor's art as seriously as I do. So my editor approached me for this book specifically, and I don't think that it would have been handled in any other way had it not been for somebody who genuinely loves her music as much as I do. I think you can sense that and feel that with people. And like, obviously, if you have been a fan of Taylor since debut, then like, you know.
When it comes to like fashion blogging and kind of the start and how things have changed over like since you said 2011, like how would you say like how would you, I guess, how has fashion changed since then? How has Taylor's kind of fashion changed and the way you write and think about fashion today?
It's really interesting how I think that in a lot of ways, fashion has and hasn't changed in that there's always trends. But I think the cyclical or the timeline nature of said trends are perhaps shorter now because of the proliferation of social media and how quickly we burn through certain trends. But I think when it comes to Taylor specifically and her style and her fashion, what rings true always for me is that I've always described every era that she dresses for, because like from 2011 to now, we've seen quite a number of very distinct eras, as we've seen, you know, as many distinct albums really since 2011. So she's always had, you know, she's methodically dressed to the era, but I've always said that her fashion for an era is like window dressing, because there's always an innate sense of Taylor-ishness to her fashion. There's always something that's recognizable at the core. It's like a uniform being worn where there's always something recognizably her to everything that she wears, just as there's always something recognizably her in everything that she writes. So the themes of her album may change, you know, love or revenge or friendship or dealing with, you know, the realities of, you know, what it might look like when you lose a parent, and, you know, the realities of like your changing relationship with family and friends. And as you get older, as your prism of life, you know, starts to change and shift. But there's always something at, you know, the emotional core of a song that is Taylor. Same goes for her fashion, where, you know, she may be dressing in pastels and butterflies, or she may be wearing camouflage and snake print and a lot of black, or she may be wearing, you know, really tall heels and crop tops. But there's always a sense of like coming back home and a sense of core where like the silhouette may never change, but the colors may change or the accessories may change. But at its core, there's something very Taylor, regardless of the era. It's just an evolution of self. And I think that rings true across both forms of art that she brings to the world, the sonic and the visual.
Yeah, can you feel like when she's gonna drop an album, like as a writer, kind of just like, can you see the fashion changing and you're like, all right, something's coming, or like I just feel it over time, just as long as you've been writing about Taylor and her style?
Yeah, not to plug it, but I wrote a newsletter called The Moments I Knew, which is a reference to a Taylor song called The Moment I Knew. And it's a newsletter where I dive into like the certain specific candid, or street style moments throughout Taylor's, career, where when she showed up or walked out, I immediately knew that something was different, that something had shifted. I think I more feel strength in putting the puzzle pieces together. Like I've said, I feel like her music and her fashion are these two halves of a locket, and you really require both halves in order to understand what it is she's saying, because one informs the other so strongly. So it feels easier to look back and be able to be like, oh, I think that is what like the bustiers and the corsets were trying to say now as it relates to the vulnerability and intimacy that we see on the Tortured Poets department. That makes sense to me. It's more difficult to prognosticate and be like, this is what I think plaid means, when we don't have the other half of the story, like of what TS12, like her next album might be. So it's difficult to say what something means, but there have definitely been a handful of moments in Taylor's career where she has stepped out in something so distinctly different that it's very obvious that something is happening. Like the very first time that Taylor ever wore a crop top, I remember that moment. It was June 2014. It was a pink marled crop top, and like skirt set, and she was like wearing these like super high heels. And I looked at that and I knew that the next album was coming and that it was going to be different. And that album was 1989, and it came out October of that year, and it was different.
So funny. I feel like that is just like the true Swiftie moment right there. You're like, I remember the day that I saw her in this exact fit, like everything had changed. Like I just knew, I knew.
But that's also kind of the thing of like fashion, where I've described fashion as this sense memory in and of itself. where I feel like we often describe smell as having like a sensorial thing where it places you in a moment in time, or even, taste, like it can place you in a moment in time. I feel like much of the magic of Taylor's music is that it places you in a moment in time because it's so rife with like personal details, like mine from her life, where like I remember where I was when I first heard Dear John. Like I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing the first time I heard Dear John. But like similarly, I feel that fashion plants you in a moment. And I feel like I feel like that's something that Taylor is also aware of because she's used fashion through her lyrics to place her in certain moments in time, like the scarf, like the iconic scarf is this physical totem and thing that she can tangibly hold on to as evidence of something that she did not make up in her head and is, from one of her most iconic ballads, All Too Well. Like that's an example of her using fashion to plant herself in a moment in time. So like I can remember, where I was the first time, like there were the American Music Awards when she wore this green Michael Kors dress. I was coming back from dropping off a load of laundry in my building's laundry, and I came back to my unit and my phone was blowing up with people being like, she's wearing green. And like, I remember that moment. And it's these visual moments. Like, even if I told you like, oh, do you remember when she performed Dear John live? Like, I know that you're thinking of the purple halter chiffon dress from the Speak Now tour with the fireworks bursting off in the background. And that's part of the magic of fashion, is that dress comes to your memory, right? Like it's this visual moment and thing that plants you in a moment in time, right?
Absolutely. She's incredibly intentional with her fashion. And it's so cool to hear about the flip side of how she also incorporates. I mean, how many times does she mention a dress or a black dress throughout her lyrics? There's so many. And so it's cool to hear about the flip side of that and how you look at both sides of the coin as well. You mentioned, so obviously her style somewhat shifts throughout each era. There's different, components that are kind of the pillars of each of those styles. But we definitely know there's some sort of like Taylorisms that she has throughout the eras that carry over from era to era. But when you think of something that's just like classic Taylor, I guess you would say, what do you think of? Is it the cat eye that's sharp enough to kill a man? Is it that bold red lip? Like, what do you think of when you think of like that's Taylor?
I definitely think a black eyeliner, cat eye flick, a red lip, a knit sweater, and a plaid, like a pleated mini skirt and some kind of chunky shoe. And when you think about it, is like I do fashion history deep dives on Instagram where I kind of like will take an image from now and say like, you know what this reminds me of? This moment from 2014 or this moment from 2017. And there are so many moments where like Taylor has worn like a navy chunky cable knit sweater, a pleated plaid miniskirt, and then like the accessories kind of change around it. Like maybe it's a chunky loafer, maybe it's a combat boot, maybe it's a cute like slim heeled Oxford, maybe it's a teetering tall like stiletto heel, maybe it's a flat boot, maybe she pairs it with a tote bag or a shoulder bag or like curls or straight hair, but like the core of it still remains the same. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. And even maybe like the colors might change of the knit, the colors might change of the skirt, but there's always something like, for me, like there's just a quintessential Taylor fall girl energy to like a certain outfit that I think she just comes back to time and time again.
Yeah, and to that point, like how does she like repurpose? Yeah, I know for us, like sometimes you'll wear the same thing, but you'll try it in a different way. I know I've seen in your blog that sometimes she'll bring back something from 2 years ago, but use it in a unique way. Like how do you think about, or how have you seen her repurpose different items that she has?
Yeah, I've definitely seen her like restyle and rewear things in different ways, like pairing, a shoe with like a skirt or pairing a shoe with a pair of jeans. It's interesting, like even if we look at the Chiefs game that most recently happened, the Page pants that she was wearing, she wore those pants in January of of this year, but I guess of the 2023-2024 season. And she, styled it similarly but differently then with like a puffer jacket and a beanie and like chunky combat boots. And this previous time she paired it with like a quarter zip and like high heeled boots and like a slicked braid. So similar but different.
So throughout the eras themselves, we've kind of mentioned how her style shifted and how you've, of course, kind of evolved through different mediums. Do you feel like there was like a big shift of your own content throughout that time, through the eras? Like, do you remember like from in the Speak Now era, I was here and then I switched to here, or like maybe Reputation, you're like, oh, now I'm on TikTok. Like, do you associate certain eras with your own shifts as well?
That's interesting. I feel like no. I think that my hope or my goal is to continue to show up consistently. And I think that's really the key for any creator, creatives, author, writer, person, is that showing up consistently and genuinely and joyfully is, I think, the core of everything. So I don't really delineate things by like what platform du jour I liked the most, because I try to just show up every day. I think, I mean, ultimately I would hope that the longest lasting legacy would be like the blog is kind of like the lifeblood, the archive, like the source of truth. And then hopefully, this book represents volume 1 of Who's to Say, as, this physical testament to a comprehensive and detailed and nuanced look at her fashion and style, because Taylor Swift's Style, the book, doesn't even cover the Tortured Poets department, because it went off to print when Taylor announced the Tortured Poets department at the 2024 Grammys. So it's interesting that her creative productivity has given me, fingers crossed, a runway to continue down if there's interest in the future.
Yeah, selfishly, I grew up a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and seeing kind of how Taylor's brought fashion and women's fashion specifically to sports. What have you noticed there? Because I think before you had Erin Andrews and you had like a few other that were doing designs in football, but I think Taylor has done a really great job of bringing her uniqueness to the sport as well.
For sure. I think there's an entire sidebar section to, Taylor Swift Style Volume 2 that could be dedicated to Chiefs game day fashion, because I think she approaches game day fashion with just as much care and thought and intent as she does the rest of her fashion, but just in a slightly different lens.
Building off of that, actually, I feel like I mentioned it, I call it the outside era. So seeing her going to these Chiefs games, I feel like we get to almost see a different side of her. And I'm curious to see if you would agree, because of course, typically what we've been seeing the last few years of Taylor, she's going to award shows, she's performing, she's doing things on a much like larger, grander professional scale. Whereas a Chiefs game, she's able to dress in entirely different fashion, quite literally. She can, be much more casual, which she isn't always, but she is at times. And I've noticed specifically for her sports fashion, she tends to go a bit more like high-low with the levels of fashion she's choosing. She'll mix some really, expensive pieces that are high-end designer, and then with like a $30 Victoria's Secret corset that was on sale. And I'm like, this is a whole new side. It's really fun to see. And I feel like we're almost unlocking something new here. So I'm curious how you feel now getting to see this other side of her and a new way of her dressing, if it's kind of been, exciting for you and switching things up for you as well.
I've always said that there are kind of 3 pillars to Taylor's fashion, and there are kind of 3 sub pillars when it comes to her Chiefs fashion. But one of Taylor's style pillars always has been the high-low. I think Taylor has always excelled at the high-low, and has for many, many years, like even dating back to, the 1989 era. In 2014, she would wear like a pair of Christian Louboutin shoes with a dress from Urban Outfitters. She would wear like a Brandy Melville $30 New York like varsity shirt and pair it with a Prada bag. Like the high low is classic Taylor, and I think is a huge, you know, ongoing part of her visual brand, and is a big part of, you know, her as a celebrity, of, you know, maintaining this sense of aspiration, inspiration, but also this sense of relatability and accessibility, which is a big, huge part of, you know, her music, is creating content from her life and creating art that is relatable, that we resonate with, where it's like, that exact scenario may not have happened to me, but I feel that feeling. Or that exact thing did happen to me. How did she like access my diary pages? Like, that's my story. What, like, the high-low is like classic Taylor, but I think her game day fashion specifically has been such a fantastic intentional gameplay of, you know, evoking or using local brands from Kansas City, using women-owned brands, using vintage to her benefit of, you know, pieces that are sustainable, that don't, you know, funnel money directly into the NFL merchandise funnel. You know, using sentimental accessories that underline why she is there, which is, you know, her romantic relationship with Travis Kelce. You know, she'll wear 87s. She'll wear like cute, sweet, like a TNT like monogrammed bracelet that is a reference to her and his initials. Like, I think what's really cool about Taylor's game day fashion is not necessarily that we're seeing a different aspect of her style, which I guess that we are, because like we've never really seen her have to execute so many outfits that have a certain amount of guardrails in it, of like, it needs to fit a certain color theme, and it needs to allude to, you know, like it needs to tie into the reason why she is there. So there are, you know, constants and constraints of her game day fashion that is interesting to watch play out repeatedly, like week over week at all of these game days. But what's more interesting is that we're seeing Taylor show up fashionably, consistently, as like, she's the main character of our universes, but like in that universe, she is a secondary character in that universe. And so it's interesting to see how she dresses to be a secondary player in that world, because she's not the main character, even though she's the main character of our world.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And even when you talk about the collaboration, working with different women in the sport as well, and it just is, I think it's brought a unique style, and shows that, you know, shows the involvement of women's sports paraphernalia as a way of showing off. Because I think basketball does a great job of it, but football, in a sense, doesn't do it as much. And I think Taylor's brought a lot to that as well. Yeah, as we kind of slowly start to wrap up, I kind of wanted to get just a little bit of a rapid fire in as well. Just kind of some of your favorite Taylor Swift things, as well as your book. So I guess we first have to start off as like, what is your favorite Taylor Swift album, or at least one of, or two of them?
Debut.
Debut. Okay, perfect. What's the most like underrated album?
Debut.
Sounds good. I'd say favorite. What's your favorite? What's her favorite? Your favorite look of hers of the 2024 year?
The Golden Gloves.
Perfect. Can you recommend a book you think Taylor Swift fans would enjoy?
Taylor Swift Styles.
Look at that.
The New York Times best-selling.
I know. Look at that. Easy.
Style handbook. Taylor Swift Styles. Yeah.
That's good. Hannah, if you have any final questions, I do have one more, but I do also want to let you get in any that you I might have missed.
Oh, not putting me in the hot seat now. Okay. What would you say your like 3 go-to Taylor Swift songs are? So no matter what mood you're in, what you're feeling, those are the 3 that, you know, you can just have on a loop all day and you'd be good to go. I didn't make you choose one because that's just evil. I was like, we'll do 3.
Like, regardless
Mhm.
of mood, those songs always hit. Okay. Tim McGraw, Style, And right now, yeah, I'll like lead, like those are like two like top iconics. And like right now in this current moment, I can't get enough of uh illicit affairs. But illicit affairs is like in my top 30. Like that song always hits.
We're very excited to see your Spotify Wrapped and to see if this actually plays out.
I had the realization the other day where I was like, oh God, it's December 1st. My Spotify Wrapped is locked.
And if Taylor Swift isn't your number one, Sarah, what are we doing here?
There's not a shadow of a doubt that it will be. It's just a matter of like, did I come in at the same or more the number of minutes spent listening to Taylor Swift as I did in 2023? You are your own
competition at this point. I understand.
Correct, exactly. Do you land within like the 1%, like the 1 percentile?
I have, but I don't always, because I hyper fixate on whatever concerts I'm going to that year. And if she's not performing that year, then usually I'm in like the 0.05. Like I go down a little, you know?
Okay, yeah. I think last year I was in like the 0.01, and I think the year before I was in the 0.001. So we'll see where I land this year.
It is a big achievement.
Yeah, I would say, when she drops a certain album, does that become your number one album, or do you still have like a midnight in the back?
That's the thing, is that like Tortured Poets Department solidly from April through to August was just constant, and it's only been fall is like quintessential Taylor season. So, and there are a lot of like album anniversaries because she released so many albums in like Q4 of an even year. So fall is like go time Taylor Swift season. So, when the anniversary of debut comes around, I will be listening to debut constantly, top to bottom. But also, we're in December now. So like this is peak Evermore season. There's a seasonality to Taylor Swift's albums where every album feels like a season.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, like when she was doing all like the Taylor versions and albums, did you notice a change in fashion there? Because I feel like that was like a very stressful time of just going through it with your management label. So did you see changes in style there too?
I think the re-records and the Eras tour both effectively do a very good job at referencing the original album while also refreshing it and like modernizing it and tweaking it and refining it. So everything feels emotionally the same, but well, actually that's not true. She does a very good job at referencing but refreshing, like it to the point that they're recognizable, but they're like new and they feel now. Yeah.
Agreed.
Perfect. The way we like to end this podcast, it's a two-sided question, so it has two different answers. But what should be in a writer's toolkit?
Person who loves them and knows them and is willing to be honest with them.
Perfect. And then on the opposite side, I'll change it up a little bit. What should be in a fashionable or someone that has a good sense of style? What should be in their toolkit?
A trench coat.
All right. Sounds good.
I was like, please say something I own. Please say something. Yes, I own a trench coat. I do.
You own a trench. I know you own a trench. Yeah. A solid trench. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you as well, Hannah, for joining us. Sarah, please let us know where we can find you on the internet or anything that's coming up in your world that we can support.
For sure. So you can find me on TaylorSwiftStyle.com, on Instagram at TaylorSwiftStyled, on Substack or my regular newsletter, TaylorSwiftStyle.substack.com. And my book, Taylor Swift Style, is available wherever books are sold. I am so excited to be wrapping up the final days of the Taylor Swift Style book tour by signing books at events, local bookstores that support this book. And I've been so proud and so happy to be going to so many indies across the United States and Canada. And the book tour is wrapping up in Scottsdale, Phoenix at the Poison Pen, in Denver, Colorado at the Tattered Cover, and then in Charlotte, North Carolina at That's Novel. Tickets are available with links on my blog, Instagram, and Substack.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We'll make sure to link all that. Again, thank you. It was a pleasure, and have a great rest of your day.
Cheers. Thank you guys so much for having me on and opening up your space for this highly niche topic. It means a lot.